Before we stand up, just feel the power of this posture. So mind in Dan Chen, my hands and my feet are both with my Dan Chen. So everything's focusing into that point. The mind is still and quiet. So the mind is notoriously tricky. It's always drifting off, talking to itself. So we just want to try and keep with the image of this body. If you get the chance, sort of sit in front of a mirror when you're meditating. So you've got that constant reminder, you've got the image of yourself sitting quietly. So they say, Suzuki used to say that when you're sitting in Zazen, you're enlightened. But the time that you're sitting, there's part of you that's enlightened. Part of you is quiet and still. Even though your mind may be racing and thinking about other things, there's part of your mind that is with your body. That's the part of the mind that we want to cultivate. So mind in Dan Chen, it just means concentrate, really. Bring your concentration to a point, a gathering in the lower belly. And it's pretty much the height of your hands. Okay, so let's stand up. Bringing the mind, the concentration, the focus back to the Dan Chen. So one hand front, one hand back. You can have fists because you can sort of clench them and get even more of a determined concentration. Dan Chen and Ming Men. We want the feeling that my legs have come up from the ground and are grabbing my spine at this point. They're not, they're holding the hips and the hips are holding the sacrum, but just try and feel that your legs come a little bit higher up the spine than they really do. I've got a friend who's a dancer, and she said in dance, they imagine that their leg reaches all the way up to their armpit. So they've got really long legs. But here, this is this point where the fists are that's important. And then I can just release what's beneath this. So I want the feeling that the spine beneath this point is hanging, and the tip of the tail has like a searching intelligence that's trying to find the ground. So my tail is extending towards the ground, and the upper spine from this point upwards is just rearing up. And then a feeling that this point where the fists are is beneath the heart, which is giving the heart a thrust upwards and pulling the head back. So the head tends to droop forwards. So the head point tends to be further forwards than it should be. And this feeling of bow legs. The legs are trying to hug the ground, what Nitzan calls grabbing the ground. The legs are having to do two things. One, hold me up, which requires them to have a sense of straightening. And two, pull me down to the ground, which requires them to be bending. So there's both tendencies. And the one we're not used to is the bending one. So that's the one we need to practice. Keeping the mind with the Dan Qian and the Ming Men, really try and release the sacrum. When you get that, it will feel like it's spreading across and also dropping. The sacrum becomes like a smile, dipping in the middle. And then let's just move from leg to leg. So just simple. Keeping the focus in the Dan Qian. So my mind is still still and quiet, but now my body is moving. Movement is life. And to move well is to live well. Can't remember who said that. One leg is bending, one leg is straightening. Feel the bending of the leg. So first of all, I have to straighten it as much as I can, and then I bend it. And the bending is really just sending the knee out. And there's two phases to the bending. There's the beginning of the bending, which is moving me. And then there's the end of the bending, which is supporting me. I want to feel the difference between those two phases. So here this bends to pull me across, and now it's having to support me, so it continues bending because I don't want to come up. But it's quite a different feel. It's like the difference between active and passive. This leg is now very active, it's pulling me, and now it's just passively supporting me. Try and get the knee active. My knee actively moves out. So what that will also do is break here, the hip. So as the knee moves out, it pulls me down, because I don't want the knee going out to pull me up out of the supporting leg. My knee bends and moves in that direction, and this stays down. That's it. So really let yourself sway so that we can really feel this bend in the hip here. So we're not afraid to let the head move. We want the head to move. If it wants to move, it moves. I don't try and keep it unnaturally still. Remember, it's the mind that's still. The body is moving. The knee moves, my body reluctantly follows. There's always a lag between what the active part is doing and what the rest of you is doing. Let's try this one. It's the same thing, really, but just bringing the foot off the ground. And now riding horse proper. So I want my arms to mirror my legs. My legs are trying to hug, embrace, grab the ground. My arms are as though hugging another person. So intimacy, this sense of bringing the other into your body. When you hug someone, you take them in. I want the feeling that I'm doing that with the ground. I'm bringing it up into my belly. Keep the mind on this point. Now let's start breathing. Keep the mind on this point. Feel the dantian now being like a muscle. It's tightening to pull you into this part, and then it's pushing, expanding to send you backwards. But all of the action is in the dantian. The motor is the Dan Qian. Feel the tail extending backwards as the head extends backwards, and then the tail pulling under as the head comes forwards. When you do this phase, use the legs to bring you down, because the legs will tend to push you up, because they're not actually attached to the Ming Men, they're attached to the hips, which is beneath the Ming Men. I want to really pull my sacrum down into my legs here. We have to try and cultivate the correct sinking. So a sinking which we start doing in Tai Chi, which is just relaxing and letting gravity pull us down. That's not quite right. I want it to be the legs idea. So my legs are trying to pull me down here. They're pulling at my sacrum and tugging me down. It's much more active then. It's also more painful. But it's like a pain that you choose. So it's not so bad. So I'm pulling my sacrum down. And then here's a bit of respite, so you can let yourself come off a bit here. Pulling at the Dan Qian, but also pulling with the legs. Legs are tugging my sacrum, pulling it down to the ground. So the two modes of the legs, the straightening and the bending, are sort of tussling with each other all the time. Feeling this point again. And then the shoulders packing down into the hips. Heavy elbows. My elbows are pulling my shoulders down. And then if I can really feel that I'm holding my spine at this point with my legs, then I can let the sacrum relax and the tail relax. Let the feet spread onto the ground so that like my feet get bigger. And then I feel that my hips are sinking down into my feet. So when you put your hands on another person, what they should feel is the ground beneath your foot. So there's this connection, a really clear connection through from the ground into the hand. This is why it's important to pull with the legs. If you push with the leg, if I push myself with this leg and then land on this foot, then I never really make a proper connection with the ground. I want to open up to the ground so that the ground can come up into me. So that requires me to make an immediate connection with it So when I pull with the leg, I'm immediately grabbing that ground. And then as I move into it, the ground can come up into me and into the opposite hand. So this is why we pull. If you don't pull with the legs, then you'd never really develop cross energy. Now let's try turning. Putting the hands on the Dantian Ming Men just to immobilize the upper body so that I feel this turn really coming from my legs. It's the same as moving side to side, really. It's just a little bit more concentrated because I'm not allowing this point where my hands are to move side to side. I'm just turning around it, which allows me to remain a little bit more concentrated on this point. Feel this leg straightening. Feel this leg also having to sort of push me back a little bit, otherwise I'll just come too far into it. And then this leg bends and I start coming round, and then it becomes a support. So it's pushing, but not in order to move me, in order to keep me still. This is the leg that's moving me. So it's the empty leg that moves you, and it's the full leg that supports you, that tries to stop you from falling, stop you from moving anymore. So actively straightening, actively bending, passively bending, actively straightening, actively bending, passively straightening. Want to be able to feel all of those four modes in the legs. So I get a sense of the two legs working together, but not doing the same thing. Try and keep the mind still and focused. Gathering at the Dantian. Quiet mind is difficult. The main reason it's not quiet, the main reason we talk to ourselves is to cheer ourselves up. So we're constantly telling ourselves how wonderful we are and how terrible everyone else is. So when you do quieten the mind, it's horrible because suddenly you don't have that support. So you just have to grow up and just learn to just be present without this constant bolstering of the ego. Now just let yourself swing. Again, coming from the ground. I don't want it to come from the shoulders. The shoulders move, obviously, but everything's coming from the ground, from the legs, from the turning of the hips and the waist. Now it's more the waist rather than the hips. So there's a twisting going on within the torso. There's a torque, and that's the waist. sink into the leg, and then just power up and feel that coming up and lifting the heart. Yeah, so what we don't want is to be doing this. We don't want to work with a heavy heart. The heart is lightening with each action. So here, ooh, something's coming up. Let's just try a little bit of the heart qigong, just for the spine, really. It's this part here, reaching up, feeling that mid-spine point, and just letting it pull in so that this can not just rise up, it can release, feeling that something from the upper heart is releasing towards the ceiling, and then let it drop. So reaching out, bringing the room into my heart, and then like a fountain, issuing the energy upwards. All the time keeping the legs bent. So don't straighten the legs into the flow. Now let's bring it back to riding horse. Feeling the focus here. This will tend to be a little bit too far backwards, because my heavy thinking head will pull everything on up here forwards. So I have to get this slotting underneath the heart, underneath the head. And then you can really feel the tail just hanging down. And now bringing the arms up into ward off without compromising the spine too much. So when you make a connection to the ground with your sinking and your mind in Danqian, and you get the posture right, so this point is beneath the heart, then the heart starts to open up and expand. And that's what the arms are doing here. They're sort of pulling this apart. So the hands trying to drift towards each other is actually spreading the shoulders and the back. So John was always adamant that what he was teaching was not Chinese and had very little to do with qi or qin or shen, the three main Chinese substances. So qi is energy, if you like, jin is essence, and shen is spirit. So John's idea of spirit, his feeling for spirit, is very different from the Chinese. And his feeling for energy had nothing to do with qi. And when he would throw people, it looked like he was using jing. That's this sort of springy, elastic energy that comes from a firing of the hips and the waist. But he could do it with no contact. And so that's obviously not something that's passing from him to the other person. So it's obviously not jin. When we moved to Blakeney, I think what the main realization that came out at the beginning was that this is the true center, not this. So it's heart work. There's a beautiful poem by Ronald Johnson, and he's just put the word earth, all in lowercase, all the letters, together 3 times with no space. So earth, earth, earth. That's all it is. But when you look at it, you see that it contains 2 hearts. It contains a hearth. It contains here, it contains art. And so they're all parts of the earth. They're all the earth expressing itself inside us, the heart especially. And now let's try full and empty, because this, in a sense, is the exercise where we can get it most clearly. So here I really want to bend the leg in order to move myself forwards, but use that bending to beckon the ground up, beckon the earth up into my heart. And the other arm reaches as this leg empties, and then up. So I'm just bringing the earth up into my heart. I'm not using the earth as a hard surface upon which to fire my energy. I'm bringing it up into me. It's a very, very different feeling. This is a way of working that most martial artists would really dislike, because it rips you raw, it makes you vulnerable. It makes you a little bit weepy. It's the sort of openness that you need to allow the earth in. It's not just open, it has to be empty. I have to empty inside to make space for this rising energy. Here I want to use my spine to bring the energy that's come up into the hip up into the heart. So I want to feel what actually has to happen. The leg has to work to pull my weight into it, but then my spine needs to work to bring that energy up into my heart. So this is one of those exercises you can just do all day, because it's just so beautiful. Feel the emptying. The emptying is not just becoming nothing. It's a reaching, it's an extending. And then I can bring that in and fill. So softness is what we're always looking for. And again, not a softness that is just an emptiness, but a softness that envelops. Ronnie has brought two Qigong masters from China over. They're doing a workshop now down in the desert. And I went to meet them. They're lovely guys, all smiles. And I just reached my hand down, took their hands one at a time, and I got a jolt. I just got a shock because they were soft. And it's just a quality you just never encounter here. The earth comes up into the heart via the hearth. The hearth is the dantian, if you like. It's the place around which the hands and the feet gather when we meditate. And heart contains ear, and it contains here, and it contains heart. And they're all really to do with this part, the correct use of the head. It's so difficult, this. We're so used to just hardening the leg in order to prop ourselves up from it, to try and soften it and bend it and allow what's beneath it to come up and what's above it to come down. It's just really difficult. But if you've got an image in your mind of not so much a picture, but a sense of what you're wanting to happen, it's like hope. It's like a sense of the future. How are you going to be in a few years' time when you're just a lot more advanced? We need intimations of that. We need feelings of that. Otherwise, we'd never move. This is the miracle of the human being, really. We have this ability to get glimmers of the future. And now let's change the feet round, and same thing, but bringing it up into so from the heart down into the opposite hand. So as I come forward, I'm bringing the energy up first into the hip, the dantian, and then up into the heart. And then it just reaches across. I just extend it down into my hand. And then I drop that hand down. And now as I move back, I use that hand to bring the energy up to the dantian, up the spine to the heart, and then into the opposite arm. So I want the intensity and the intention in the mind to come from the energy in the spirit, not to come from a tensing of the leg. I'm not straightening my leg into my hand. I'm not even getting tense in the leg, beyond that sort of elastic tension. So John would talk about cross energy all the time. He'd introduce it as an idea in the short form. And very few other Tai Chi masters do. John learned about it from one of Chen Manqing's books. Chen Manqing just mentioned it at some point. And John asked Liang, who he was studying with, about it. And Liang said, oh, it's nothing, just forget it. But John couldn't because he felt it. And especially when you're doing the form, it's really important to concentrate on it, feel it. It clarifies the postures and just keeps your mind with it. So your mind's less likely to drift off when you're having to concentrate on something that's difficult. My foot is extending down into the ground and my hand is extending forwards. So I'm not straightening my leg in order to bring the hardness of the ground into my hand. I'm bending the leg and softening to bring the energy from the ground up into my hand. So I'm softening here. I'm bringing the ground up and letting it express in the opposite hand. And if it's easier to feel by leaning forwards a little, then just go for it. That Chen Manqing posture may not be right all the time. And if you watch him do the form, he's often leaning forwards, especially when he's in the back foot. And now let's just try a little bit of the figure of eight. Again, trying to keep this point still. This is my mind, my still mind. And the rest is my body. So I keep the mind still, and then the body can move with real clarity and incision. The still point of the turning world. So my turning makes this, if anything, more still. Minimal movement in the arms and the shoulders. This is all coming from the legs and the turning. And now let's try the figure of 8 exercise. The top hand is reaching over the head. The bottom hand is scooping underneath the foot. Feel that tightness in the middle, the waist of the figure of 8, where the two cross. And then let's just bring it back. Now let's try a little bit of the stepping with the figure of 8. And just feel the stepping as, in a sense, the simplest expression of cross energy. So when I sink into one leg, it brings the energy into the other leg, which means it can do something. It can come off the ground and step. So I sink into this foot can come up and then step. And then I bring the weight into this foot, feel this side getting active, even though I'm not going to bring the foot off the ground. Bring the weight back and the energy comes into this side of my body. So when I sink into my right leg, the energy doesn't simply express in the left hand, it also expresses in the left leg. The whole side of the body becomes active as the other side of the body becomes passive. So this wants to come off the ground, it wants to do something, but I don't let it. This one I let come off the ground. And then just a bit with the other foot. I sink into one side. I sort of disappear. There's a sense I've just disappeared here. And then this can come alive and not be inhibited by the mind that needs to sink. So I sink here, and then this can just be free and be naughty, just do what it wants to do. Dantian is the point of focus, but the heart is really working, expanding and playing, moving. Let's just bring it back. So one of the nice things about Tel Aviv is I think it's got the highest gay population per capita in the world. It's also got the most number of dogs. It's got one dog per 14 people. So you're always encountering gay people. The men especially, they just have a lot of movement in the head and the upper chest. So they're expressing how they feel with this movement here. And there's just something just true about it. I don't know what it is, but that's the feeling that we want. So we don't want this just to set and become hard and heavy, which it will tend to do if I'm just sitting like this. I really have to get this underneath so that this can just start to just crumble a little bit and open up and bubble and be buoyant. And then I need to get my head out of the way so that that energy can drift upwards instead of getting trapped in my head. So the guy next door's gay. So they're always gesticulating. There's gestures everywhere, and it's just expressing what they're feeling here in the heart. One of my old ladies who's died now, she'd read a lot of poetry. She'd read a lot. I mean, her English was better than mine. So we used to just talk about poetry most of the time when we were chatting. And she said to me once, you do realize, Stephen, that all the people we talk about were gay. And it was true. Is that something about that freedom in the energy, that willingness to express that can come into the art? If ever she was too tired to work, I'd just read poetry to her and she was in seventh heaven. Okay, let's finish. So let's bring the feet up and instantly into this. So really this movement here is just this. It's just this exercise going on all the time in the background. It's always wanting to express somehow. Like a sensuality of the two sides of the body, just doing opposite things and playing just for the hell of it, just for the feeling, just for the pleasure of the feeling. So I don't want to hold the energy back with my idea of myself or how things should be or how my body is. I'm always willing to just let go so that something can express through me, something that takes me by surprise more than anyone. And that's the artistic impulse, that's the creative process. And without that, you're not really alive. So that Benjamin Franklin quote. Some people die at 25 but aren't buried until 75. And then just allowing it to subside. Come home to the Dan Chen. It's like it's always there. There's always like this double figure of 8 going on inside everything, but especially the Dan Chen.